More often than not, people actually do get it wrong when it comes to feeding their bearded dragon, either becoming overly reliant on insects, giving it the wrong amount of food for its age, or ending up with a dragon that is completely addicted to some form of insect, usually superworms, and then being unable to get it to move on to proper plant matter. Now in today's video, what we're going to be doing is looking at all of these problems, talking about what you should be feeding your bearded dragon depending on its age, the ratios of insects to plant matter, how to get your dragon to eat veg if it won't, and I'll also be talking about a couple of other bits of useful information, for example dusting and supplementation, but let's get straight into it. Now as soon as a bearded dragon hatches out the egg, as is the case with a lot of animals, when they're born, their job is to grow. This means that in the first 6 months of life for your bearded dragon, you are going to be feeding it what seems a ridiculous amount of food. But not actually a ridiculous amount, as is often suggested. So what you should be doing is offering it feedings of live foods, insects, 2 or 3 times a day in 5-minute intervals each, and also offering plant matter every single day at the start of the day, giving it a couple of hours so that the dragon can at least pick a few bits of the veg off, and then it can have insects later. If you feed it insects straight away, it's probably going to be full and just ignore the plant matter. After about 6 months of age though, they do start to slow down when it comes to growing and they don't need as much, so you can curve down the amount of live foods you're offering to just once a day. Now live foods are offered a lot at this early stage because they are high in protein and stuff and they are more calorie dense, so that is what the dragon needs in order to grow. However, lots of people do actually recommend feeding your bearded dragons in its first year of life in sort of 15-minute intervals, and this is far too much. If a hatchling beardie is being fed 3 times a day in 15-minute intervals, that means that it is solid eating for 3/4 of an hour every day, and that is just way too much. Which is why on the Bearded Dragon Network, which I am a moderator in and you can find the link to down in the description, we always recommend feeding insects in 5-minute intervals rather than 15, just so that, you aren't really overdoing it. Within this, it is, like I said, also essential that you do offer a range of plant matter from the get-go. There's no point holding on because a young bearded dragon will still take to plants as much as an old one, as long as it's got the opportunity to, and it doesn't get into bad habits of just eating insects. So basically, you just want to vary things up. Personally, for my bearded dragon, I like to grow weeds and stuff because they are more nutritious than what you can buy in the supermarket and so on. But if you're offering a range of weeds as well as a range of stuff from the supermarket from a very young age, the dragon will learn to eat it, will learn to accept the veg, and you won't have a problem when it grows older. At the early stage, it is also a good idea not to get your dragon in the habit of just eating fatty foods. Primarily, the number one bad guy in all of this is the superworm. Now, superworms, or Mario worms as we like to call them in the UK, are not bad feeders. They do gut load extremely well, they're extremely easy to keep, they're cheap, and our dragons love them. But there is a bad side. They are incredibly high in fat. I don't think they're quite up there as waxworms, but they're getting close, and so if you're feeding Mario worms or superworms, whatever you want to call them, on a daily basis, it's gonna set that habit of that dragon coming to expect this fatty treat, and as it grows older, it's gonna hold out and just want the superworms rather than eating its plants or any of the healthier insects. Now, do bear in mind that this is not a reason not to use them at all. Dietary variety is incredibly important. I have made a video about this in the past, but just to talk about it in brief, in the wild, our animals are all going to be eating far more different supplies of food than we can possibly offer them in captivity, and so you shouldn't be making excuses as to stop feeding one. For example, the common one is people stop feeding crickets in favour of dubia roaches or locusts. No, don't do that. There is stuff that you might get in crickets that isn't quite there in roaches or locusts, and we don't know about all of this biology yet in the reptile hobby, but what we do know is that crickets are available, so why would you miss them out? Moving on to adulthood, bearded dragons do sort of stop growing pretty much after they reach about 12 months of age. Might be a little bit of growth up until 18 months, but by 12 months most of it's done. So at this point you really want to curb the calorie intake. Personally, I only feed my bearded dragon char 5 times a week. On sort of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday I offer plant matter, and then the same on Friday and Saturday. On Wednesday and Saturday I also offer 2 live food feedings, leaving Thursday and Sunday without any foods altogether. Now I do vary this up a bit, but basically what it means is that 2 days of the week he gets plant matter and insect matter, and then a further 3 days of the week he gets just plant matter, and 2 days of the week he doesn't get anything at all. Now the thinking behind this is that basically in the wild they aren't going to be eating food every single day. This is a reptile, not a mammal or a bird. Its metabolism is quite low in comparison to those groups of animals, and so it doesn't need the calorie intake. And if you're just giving it loads and loads of food, that gives them the opportunity to become fussy and start holding out for the insects and stuff. Personally, I do like to leave those 2 days rather than just 1 day a week, say, without food, because I find that my bearded dragon is a lot less fussy if I just keep giving him breaks every now and again. It's all well and good, I suppose, me saying that if you start from a young age you can get your bearded dragon to grow up and it won't be fussy. My bearded dragon certainly isn't fussy, especially with the variety of insects and plant matter that I give him. He doesn't really have time to be fussy. I mean, with the weeds and stuff, there is sort of seasonal availability. So at the start of the year, I was feeding him completely different stuff to what I'm feeding him now. And then moving from one type of weed to the other, he'd often get bored of one type if it'd been in season for a while. So it is just for that purpose, to vary things up so they don't get bored. But like I say, it's all well and good me saying this. What if your bearded dragon is one of those ones, and there are a lot of them, that is completely addicted to superworms and won't touch anything else? What do you do? Honestly, it couldn't really be more simple. Just do what I've said in this video, offer them a good bit of variety and stick with the adult feeding regime, 5 times a week, insects twice a week. If you cut out the thing that they are addicted to, they will get hungry, they know when they are hungry, and they will try stuff soon enough. Now, dietary variety doesn't have to stop offering a range of weeds from the garden and then buying a number of different insects. There are actually ways that you can top up and get even closer to what you'd have in the wild. Now, 2 products I've got with me that I would really recommend for this are Arcadia's Dragon Fuel, which you probably can't see, so it probably won't focus, and Arcadia's Flower Boost. Now, each of these products you just sprinkle on top of the veggie stuff you're going to give them, and these do have all sorts of different stuff that you probably can't find locally, and so it is increasing that variety. As well as this, I do like to put Dragon Fuel and Flower Boost into my insects gut load formulas, and this is where you can get more variety as well. Now, gut load basically means that you are going to feed the insects that you are feeding to your dragon, and thereby increase the amount of different foods that the dragon's getting. So if you've got dubia roaches, say, and they might like to eat, I don't know, turnip and potato or something, that you are not going to feed directly to your bearded dragon, or say oats or cereals and stuff that the feeder insects can eat, then you are increasing that range of nutrients and stuff that is eventually making its way into your pet. Now, once again, there are various products that can help you gut loading. Arcadia does one called Insect Fuel, which is really good, and I do like to use that. But when I talk about my own gut load formula, I basically mean that I go out, the weeds I grow for my dragon, they go into my feeder insects, which are down here, that's why I pointed there. Then also stuff out the fridge and stuff, so say the ends of carrots or whatever that us humans aren't going to eat, they all go in. The Dragon Fuel and Flower Boost, these go in. Everything goes in, whatever the insects will eat, it's increasing variety, your insects will live longer, and it's all good stuff. So whilst this is not going to be a feeder insect care video, because I'm going to be doing one of those in a few weeks, if you want to see it then subscribe, I will just take the moment to say that with your feeder insects, if you do want to get the most out of them, you have to give them lots of space, lots of cover, generally keep them in the dark, and you also do want to make sure that you're heating them. Now, one last thing to ward off fussiness in your dragon when you're feeding it is actually to make the insects move if they're not going to. Now, what I mean by this is that, like, crickets, if you chuck those in your dragon's enclosure, they're going to scoot off dead fast and run around and stuff, and it'll give your bearded dragon exercise and so on. But other insects aren't necessarily going to do that. So, for example, dubia roaches do just tend to hide and sit there if you get frightened, and locusts will often do that too. But you don't want your bearded dragon to just waltz over and eat them all in one, because that's not going to exercise it. Instead, get yourself some tongs and give your bearded dragon a run round. This also does kind of go for plant matter in the sense that you should offer it, like, if you like, you can actually like scatter bits of plants around the enclosure and let your bearded dragon find them and eat them, and then clean up any left over at the end of the day. But certainly what you want to do is, if you're offering from a bowl, you want to offer from the bowl in a specific place and let the bearded dragon come over and get it, rather than offering it food just where it's sat and just handing it to it, because it will quickly learn that that's what you're going to do and become lazy. The last thing that ties into feeding your dragon is what supplementation you're going to use. Now, I have made a complete video on this in the past, so if you want to find out about it, then do check that out. But briefly, I will mention that I choose not to dust vegetable matter, because generally it's quite high in vitamins and minerals anyway, so you just like putting excess on, and also it does like decrease the palatability of whatever food it's going on, in my experience. So if you cover your plant matter with it and it just all looks white, your bearded dragon isn't going to recognise it and won't go for it, whereas if it's like bright colours of petals or peppers or something, or even just nice deep green hues, they will recognise it and go for it a lot more readily. So this is why I do choose purely just to supplement on the insects that I use. And that is your ultimate guide to feeding your bearded dragon. So I hope I've addressed like all the possible questions really in this video in a nice quick way. I've talked about feeding different ages, I've talked about what sort of insects you want to avoid for like being addicted and stuff, so waxworms and Mario worms are the typical baddies. Then I've also talked about, on the opposite side, offering as much variety as possible, so using different insects and plant matter in turn. I've talked about gut loading your insects, how to keep them very briefly. I've talked about dusting, and I've talked about methods to ward off pickiness. But if this isn't everything and I've missed out something you want to know, then drop a comment down in the comment section down below and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Now then, this little bearded dragon Char here, as you'll have been seeing clips of him at the minute, you might be wondering, I've talked about this in like another video, but he's actually like taken to just sitting there like a security guard all the time now, and he doesn't run around as much as he used to, and that is actually because it's getting to the end of the year, things are cooling down, the day length's shortening and so on, and he is starting to go in brumation mode. Now, if you want to find out about brumating bearded dragons, I did it last year completely without like issue or whatever, and over this winter Char will be brumating again, and probably for every year for the rest of his life, I should hope. So if you want to find out about doing that and also like see me do it with Char and learn that it's not something to be afraid of, then do stick around because I'll have videos about that out soon. Anyway guys, once again I do hope that I've answered all your questions. If you do have any more, chuck them down in the comments and I'll get to them. But for now, I've been JTB Reptiles and this is the end of the video. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.